Olga, thank you so much for leading this webinar. It's really special that you make time while you are a fourth-year medical student to participate and to help and to share your knowledge. I also really enjoy your webinars. They give me a lot of peace of mind. And I just want to share with you that it just means so much that you're making time for this. Thank you so much for doing this. We're going to get started right away. Everyone keep your eye on the ball. We are going to move right away and we're going to go straight for 2 hours. Okay, so let's get started. Ready, set, go.
Thank you, Ms. Kweller, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another one of our famous webinars. We have a 3-day series. Today, we'll be tackling the reading comprehension section of the SHSAT. I want this webinar to really be focused on strategies. So we're going to start with talking about strategies and different genres of passages that you guys can expect on this exam. And then following that discussion, we'll talk a little bit about annotation strategies, and then we'll practice a reading passage. And if we have time, then we can also get to poetry as well.
Oh, Olga, just put today's date so that everyone has it. We are also recording the meeting so that everyone can replay it as well.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the different genres that you guys can expect on this exam. So if we look in the handbook, the genres that they talk about, they divide it into informational versus literary. But for you guys, what that really means, or the way that we can think about it, is fictional stories or more non-fictional structured journal-like articles. So that's what I'm going to label this at. And then it's really important for you guys to understand the types of passages that you're reading. So we're going to talk about the different strategies to read those passages and to understand them based on the genre of the passage. And then I'll show you guys how that plays out when we look at practice questions. So let's get started. So we can label this side fiction. Sorry, guys. And then we can label this side nonfiction. So let's start with the right-hand side of the board first, nonfiction. So what you guys need to understand about the nonfiction passages on this exam is that they are extremely structured. And the reason I teach you guys this is because we have to learn how to use that structure to our advantage as readers, as test takers. It makes it easier for you guys to find the answers to the questions they're asking you when you understand the underlying structure of the passage. So the number one thing that I'm going to put here with 3 big stars is that they are structured. So now let's break down that structure. What does that mean to us? So it means exactly what you guys are taught in school about when you learn how to write passages, right? When you learn how to write a good essay. So any good essay needs to have what you guys all need know as the thesis statement, right? So that's the number one thing. So thesis statement. And the reason that this is easier to figure out on a nonfiction type of passage is because that thesis statement is going to be clear and the location of it is going to be somewhere in the first paragraph. Usually it's in the last sentence of the first paragraph. So that's really important because when a question on these kinds of passages asks you about a main idea, which I can guarantee that question will come up, you guys will know where to find that main idea. And that main idea will lie somewhere in the first paragraph, usually at the end of the first paragraph. So this is the main idea. And it is usually located at the end of the first paragraph. So that's a huge hint to you all as test takers about where you need to look for the main idea in a passage that's very structured on the SHSAT. Okay, so next thing that we learn about structures, right? The way you guys learn to write an essay is you have a thesis statement, and then following that thesis statement, your thesis statement is an argument. So any type of passage that you read on this exam, the author is trying to convince you of something. The author has some sort of opinion and they have some purpose, right? They're either trying to argue their point, or they're either trying to inform you of something, but there is some purpose for why they wrote this sort of literary nonfiction journal style article. So in the thesis statement, they're going to begin by giving you that argument, that objective, that whatever it is that they're trying to communicate to you. And then after that, every single paragraph is going to be a mini objective that relates back to that thesis statement. So it's going to be a mini argument that supports that argument, right? So the author is going to say that, for example, online school is detrimental to students' learning because of A, B, and C, right? And then A, B, and C are going to be all these different reasons that they're going to try to convince you of that. For example, it's just a random article that I read recently, which is why I thought of it, right? And then in each one of those paragraphs, they're going to develop those reasons and give you supporting details for why those are true. So it's really important that you guys understand these types of passages, the structure that they're trying to give up. And the image that comes to mind is sort of something that's very broad, and then it gets more narrow. And then the paragraph, again, becomes a little bit broader, and then it gets narrow, and then broader, narrow, and then you have the conclusion, which just summarizes everything. So that's kind of like the visual that comes to mind for me when I'm thinking about what these passages look like. So what that means is we have the thesis statement, which we know that that's going to be at the end of the first paragraph. Then we have topic sentences. These open up each body paragraph. So this is like the mini main idea for each body paragraph. And within those body paragraphs, like I was explaining to you guys, you should look out for supporting details. So again, the reason I'm using these keywords is because the questions will use these keywords. They'll say, which of the following details supports blah, blah, blah. The blah, blah, blah will be one of the topic sentences. So you know that the answer to that question has to be a detail within that paragraph. So by understanding the structure, you're creating a roadmap for yourself of where you need to look to find the answers to the questions that they are asking you. And then the last thing that's important in these cases is the connotation. So the connotation and denotation, I talk about this in many of my webinars, but who can tell me what connotation and denotation is? Can anybody put it in the chat? So denotation, as some people are writing, is the literal definition of the word. It's what we all think of when we think of a definition. So this is the literal definition of a word. So the question is, what is connotation and why does it matter for this exam? So connotation is a little bit more nuanced than denotation. So connotation is a meaning of a word that is implied. It is part of the context, tone. Good. People are putting that into the chat. So this is the meaning of a word that is implied. So this is another very important word that I'm going to highlight right now. And the reason I'm highlighting implied is because that's a key word that many of the questions will ask you about. They'll ask you what is implied by this statement, or what is the author implying, or what is the implication of the author's argument, right? So that's a very common word. So supporting detail, main idea, implication, these are all words that you guys need to really understand because this is the language of the exam. This is how the question writers are going to tackle the things that they want you guys to answer. So what does that mean? Meaning of a word that is implied, and how is it different than the denotation? So another important point is that this is separate from its literal definition. So let's teach by example. So we can think of some words and their definitions can be pretty similar, but their connotations can be very different. So words can be neutral, they can be positive, and they can be negative. So let's start with an easy one, right? So let's just say, let's talk about a muffin, right? So let's say we're talking about muffin. So I'll put that here. And what if I call that muffin moist, right? If I say moist muffin, in that context, moist is rather positive, right? We want the muffin to be moist, well baked, so that can be used positively. But if I use a similar word, which kind of means wet, but I say soggy muffin, that is now very negative. And then the neutral one could just be like wet muffin, which doesn't really make much sense in the context of muffin. But this is a very basic example to teach you. But let's talk about more sort of nuanced examples. So for example, if you want to call somebody assertive versus domineering. So in both of those kind of categories, in both of those words, you're trying to say that somebody's kind of taking control of the situation, right? Somebody's the boss or somebody's like forceful. But in assertive, that's a very positive quality to give somebody. They're assertive, they're a good leader, versus domineering is a more negative quality. You're implying that that person, perhaps they're assertive, but in a bad way. They're taking control of the floor. They're not giving other people a voice. They're too dominating. So you guys can see how words carry more than just the definitions they're carrying. They carry sort of our intent with using them. And words can be used positively or negatively. And words go through different sort of categories over time as well. So certain words can mean very different things over time, socially, etc. So that's why it's very important to pay attention to the connotation of the words that the author is using in their writing. Because what you guys can do is you can sort of see overall how many positively connotated adjectives, and usually this is extremely important, and you guys should think about this in terms of the adjectives that the author is using. So it's important because if the author is using mostly positively connotated words, then you know that the author has a positive opinion about whatever he or she is writing about, and you're going to pick the answer choices that are also positively connotated. Versus if the author is using more negatively connotated language, then you're not going to pick a positively connotated answer choice. You're going to stick to the more negatively connotated answer choice. So the reason that this is an imperative strategy for you guys to understand is that I'm trying to teach you guys strategy. So even if you don't perfectly understand everything that the author is writing about, you're still able to get to the right answer using these sorts of strategies. And again, I'll show you more in practice about how exactly this is used when we get to a practice passage, okay? All right, so does anybody have questions on this first part of how to read these nonfiction types of things? Oh. Sorry, guys, there's like some technical difficulties about why this is disappearing. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to try to reboot the iPad because the notes are disappearing. In the meantime, if anybody has specific questions in the chat, you guys can ask and I will.
Yeah, and I can take over for now with the chat. I just want to remind all of you that you're going to have to do the high school selection. I just want to confirm everyone hears me, correct? Yes, Olga?
Yes.
I just want to let you know you're going to have to do the high school selection. So you can go to the Kweller Prep website and watch the videos on different high schools. I was actually at the Brooklyn Latin School today, and I was so impressed with the teachers and the staff. I had a meeting with the principal earlier today. I was so impressed with the school. So the Brooklyn Latin School gives you an IB diploma. This is one of many specialized high school options that you're going to have. So just remember that you are going to have to select your high schools. You don't have to rank every school. You can only rank a few if you'd like, but definitely rank as many as you can and obviously choose wisely. Absolutely keep all of these schools on your radar as the opportunity will arise. So please remember that you are going to have to be making some final decisions with the schools. I also want to remind you that this is the first of 3 webinars which we have this week. This is mostly for students. Next week, we have 2 big parent ones. One is on the lottery and the stress reduction techniques. It really just kind of will organize you. It'll tell you everything you need to know in terms of getting ready for the SHSAT, and just how to, go in very smart. You want to make sure that you're really planning your day and your few days before the test. So the stress reduction webinar we are running next week, and we're also running a special webinar just to decipher the New York City lottery system. And we're good. Olga, are you okay to proceed?
Yes, you guys should be able to see my screen in just 1 second again.
And if anyone has any questions, what I'm going to do is I'll put the high school videos in the chat. These are all a bunch of fun amateur videos we took over the years at Kweller that became extremely incredible as a resource. So I'm going to put that into the chat box so that we all have that right now. Okay. All right. I'm going to type it in right now.
Okay, so you guys should be able to see my screen now, right? Okay,
So we're good
just
from here. And everyone,
yeah.
just check the chat. I'm putting this into the chat right now. Please save this. This is a series of different videos on the high school tours that we ran over the years at Kweller Prep. Okay, go ahead, Olga.
Okay, so just to quickly review, since we just took a 5-second intermission, we talked about the nonfiction passages that you guys are going to be facing on the SHSAT. Again, the main thing here is structure. And we discussed the 3 main points, which is number 1, be aware of the thesis statement, which will give you the main idea. Number 2, be aware of the structure that every single paragraph will begin with topic sentences. And understand that within those topic sentences, within those body paragraphs, you will find supporting details. And then finally, we just did a little discussion on connotation versus denotation and how to use that to our advantage to get the questions correct. So all of this is kind of the strategies that you guys need to be using when you're reading a nonfiction passage. And those are historically and classically more straightforward. And I find that many of my students do better on those types of passages. So it's very important that you guys understand this and are able to take advantage of these strategies, because you're using these, you're able to get almost 100% of the questions right, because it's not a lot of extrapolating. For these nonfiction passages, the answers are in the passage. You just have to get really, really good at finding them. And these kinds of hints are going to tell you where to look for the answer. Now, if we transition over to the fictional passages, so these are a little bit more difficult. So when I say fictional, what I mean is more like literary genres. So these can include sort of adventure stories, they can include mysteries or myths, they can be satire, they can be sort of specific excerpts from random novels, things like that. And this really also includes poetry, but we all teach poetry separately because it's kind of its own thing that you guys learn to tackle. So what do we do with a fictional sort of passage? What is sort of our thing that we can go to? So in a fictional passage, there won't necessarily be a thesis statement, because there's not one clear main idea or argument. In a fictional passage, there is something called a plot. So a plot is what we have to focus on understanding to do well on these fictional passages. And when we dissect the plot, more specifically, what you need to understand is broadly what is going on, right? What is going on? What are the events? Main events. And the most important one that you guys should be looking out for in these sort of fictional passages is the climate or turning point. So within these passages, there will be somewhere in the middle where things change. Something big happened and things are changing. So usually you'll be able to see this in the voice of the author, in the characters. Some big transition happened, and you will be able to differentiate everything before and after. And it's important that you do this because they like to ask you about this turning point or this climax. Oh, sorry, I wrote climate, but I meant climax.
I was actually just noticing. That's funny. Okay. And everyone take a look at your phone. Take a look at, I just put a link into the chat box so that everyone has that as well. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the other thing that's important with these kinds of passages is the perspective. So you have to ask yourself, who is telling me the story? So what kinds of different perspectives can we have on this exam? So who is telling me this story? So this could be a personal story, right? And how will I know if it's personal? Well, you can use the pronouns to your advantage. So if you notice personal pronouns, so if you see words like I, me, we, mine, us, all of those are personal pronouns. So it's telling you that whoever is telling you the story is who the story is about. Does that make sense? So I'm telling you my own personal story. That's very different than having sort of this third order point of view, where you have a narrator that knows everything about everybody and it's telling you the story. So that's very, very different if you have an omniscient narrator that knows everyone's story. So that can also help you get questions correct. Understanding who is telling you the story, whose perspective it's coming from. And sometimes the question will literally ask you, whose perspective is the story being told by? In these kinds of passages, it's also important for you guys to pay attention to the setting. So the setting means where is it taking place and when. So where and when, the time period is important. Is this a story happening now in our present day, or are we going back to the 15th century to get here a story? Or are we in a complete different realm, in some kind of mythical realm? So all of that is going to set the scene for you guys about what's going on. And then the other two things that I want to mention here before we sort of get to practice is the characters. It's really important for you guys to see how the characters develop. So how is the main character different in the beginning towards the end? How is the character changing? And more importantly, what does the character learn? So a lot of times these passages like to give a moral or a lesson or some sort of takeaway. And that's a takeaway for you guys as readers of it, but it's also a takeaway for the main character. Okay, so all of these are sort of the tools that we need to have in our toolbox, and we're going to pull from all these tools when we read the passages together and try to use all of these strategies to be able to extract the correct answer. Now, before we get to the passages, one more thing that I want to talk about is annotation. So it's extremely important that you guys become good annotators and that you mark up your passages in a systematic way, right? Not in a just drawing squiggly lines everywhere just because I said that you have to mark up your passages. The way that you annotate needs to be very systematic, right? The goal is that you're helping yourself organize the information without taking away too much time, right? Because you don't want to be sitting there and summarizing every single paragraph on the side. That's going to take too much time. But you need to have a systematic way that will help you organize the information and that you will know where to go back to to when they're asking you a question, you're like, oh, I know I read that, but where is that? And then you skim the whole passage again. So that's what I want you guys to avoid doing, because I don't want you to waste time. But I want you to be very, very efficient when you take this exam. And that's going to help you be an efficient test taker beyond this exam as well, because you guys are just starting your exam journey, and you'll be taking the SAT and graduate school tests and very, very many more exams in your life. So how do we think about annotation? So what I usually do for myself is I create a system for myself based on the exam that I'm taking. And your system doesn't have to look like my system, but I'm just going to share an example of things that you can do to make your annotation systematic and give yourself sort of like a method to your madness. So I try to code my annotation, right? So different things mean different sort of squiggles mean different things in my annotation, right? So one thing that I usually do, especially when I'm reading these kinds of passages, is be mindful of characters, right? Or of names. So if they mention, let's say, Abigail, or if they mention Jacqueline, or whatever other name that you can think of, right? So what I do when I'm reading this is I decide that every single name will get a box. And the reason that I do this is because when question number 1 asks me something about Abigail, instead of having to skim the whole passage, my eyes can dart from this box to the next box to the next box, and I can more quickly find the answer. Now, the same thing I do with dates. So be mindful of dates or places. Because again, if a question asks me something about 1977, or if the question asks me something about Brooklyn, New York, and let's say there is Brooklyn, or let's say there's 1977, whatever it is that is going to be mentioned in the passage over and over again, I assign a different sort of annotation for that. So instead of box, let's say circle. Now, what gets underlined, right? So how do you figure out what's important? So what gets underlined is what we just talked about on the other page. So what gets underlined is the turning point. If I'm reading and I'm like, oh, wait, something really big just happened, I'm going to underline that. The thesis, if it's a nonfiction passage, every topic sentence can get underlined. And if you need to, you can put a phrase summary next to each body paragraph, if that helps you. But you don't want to write a whole essay summarizing the body paragraph. It should be something that takes seconds. So like 3 to 4 to 5 words maximum. On the side, you can jot down something if you need to, if it helps you sort of summarize that whole paragraph. But it's really important to have a system. So that's what I'm trying to teach you guys. So square should mean something, circle should mean something, straight underline should mean something, squiggle should mean something. And all those somethings are for you to decide. But it's important that you don't start doing this like, 3 weeks later or the day of the test. This is something that you need to practice every single time that you read a passage. And what it does is it creates sort of like, you're like a robot. You know exactly what you need to do and where you need to go back to get the answer correct. Does that make sense to everybody?
And Olga, can we also add like something I loved to do when I sat, especially even with my law school entrance exam and the bar exam, I would always put a plus at the top. If the passage is generally positive, I'd put a plus. Generally negative, I would put a minus.
Exactly. I was just going to mention this last one. So this goes into the connotation that we're talking about, right? So what Ms. Francis is talking about is if the passage is generally positive, if the author has a positive point of view on something, they're arguing pro it, all the adjectives that they're going to use are going to be positively connotated words. So you can look at many of the adjectives in the passage and you can say, is this positive or negative? And if you're not sure about the overall vibe of the essay or of the passage that you're reading, if a lot of those adjectives are majority positive, then you know that overall that passage is positive, and you can put that positive or negative sign at the top of the passage. Okay. All right, great. Does anybody have any questions before we get to practice? Okay, so I pulled some passages from Form A from the Department of Ed released 2023 to 2024 SHSAT exam. So those are the passages that I want to work out of. And while we are going through this, I also want to talk about strategies of reading, actually reading, not just the passage, but more importantly, reading the question, understanding exactly what the question is asking you, and being confident about your answer. So once we get to the answer choices, I also want to talk to you guys about some things that you 100% want to avoid. So you can start thinking about those kinds of things, because I'm going to ask soon. Now, generally, whenever we get to a passage, the first thing that I always do is I read the title. So, a memory revolution. And right away, before I even kind of like really read this, just looking at this, it seems like it's going to be more in the nonfiction sort of category of our table that we made. So right away, just glancing at this, looking at this title, looking at these little subtitles, and looking at sort of what the passage looks like. There's not a lot of quotes. It doesn't look like there's a lot of dialogue. There's not a little blurb under this that's telling me that this is an excerpt from whatever novel. So just by looking at this and being well seasoned and practiced, like you guys should all be by the point that you're taking the exam, my brain is already switching gears into the nonfiction category, right? So I'm already thinking about, I need to find the thesis statement. I need to find some topic sentences. I need to find the supporting details that are supporting that topic sentence. All of that is kind of going through my brain right away.
Olga, do you want me to put the link, or do you have the link to put it into the chat?
You could put it, or I could find it.
Okay, I'm gonna dig it up right now. Okay, and everyone, you can follow along as well. This is from SHSAT, the 2023 Form A. Okay. If you could make the screen a bit larger, just so it's easier when you have the opportunity. Okay, and I'm gonna look it up right now.
1 sec. I think I found it. I'm just gonna put it in.
Perfect. So everyone, Olga's gonna type into the chat, so you'll see where this is coming from, and you can all follow along. Do this SHSAT handbook 2 times each, please. That's your homework between now and test day. 2 times each. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Francis, you find it, because this is the
fine. I'll dig it up. Just go ahead. Keep going. It's fine. I'll do it.
Okay, so let me zoom in. So like I said, right away, I'm thinking nonfiction. So let's go ahead and start reading and see what I'm going to underline and talk about sort of what's going. I really want you guys to sort of, I want to share how my thought process is. That's what's most important for me through these webinars, because once you guys can get into the thought process of being like a good test taker, of understanding what the test maker wants from you, that's how you succeed on these exams. So a high school senior logs onto a computer at the library to double check the application due date listed on a college admissions website. Nearby, a librarian helps a group of biology students use a database to search for recent studies about mammals. In the past few decades, the internet has become an integral component of daily life for many people. The seemingly limitless power of search engines made the internet search extremely common, and today people increasingly rely on the internet's vast accumulation of sources to access all types of information. Scientists are beginning to examine how the reliance is modifying the strategies people use to store and prioritize information in their mind. So like expected, this here seems like it's going to be our topic sentence. So basically, this author is trying to inform us. They are investigating how relying on the internet is changing the way that we're storing information in our mind. And again, the title has to do with memory and now storing information. So basically, this is saying how the internet is going to affect memory, right? So when I talk about annotating or 2 or 3 words, this is what I mean. Organize it in a way for your brain to understand, for you to process that information of what you're reading. Now, as I was reading, I'm not writing all of this down, but these are the things that I noticed. So the word limitless, would you guys call it positive or negative? If someone is limitless, right? The top doesn't exist, the ceiling doesn't exist, the limit doesn't exist, right? That's obviously a very positive word. Today, people increasingly rely on the image, vast accumulation of sources. So far, it seems like these are sometimes more positive words. And then, you know how you guys are taught to write essays with the hook. So these first two examples are a hook for them to sort of start the passage, right? So it's two examples of how different people are using the internet. And it proves this sentence here, that the internet has become an integral component of daily life. And these two are just supporting details to prove that point. And they're an interesting way for the author to begin the passage, right? So this is me dissecting this sort of introduction paragraph. We found the thesis statement, which tells us everything that we're going to read about. We looked at some of the adjectives, and so far it seems like the author has a more positive view of this. And we connected what the main idea is, right? Like, how does internet affect our memory, our brain? Okay, so now we keep reading. So this subtitle, a dependable and valuable asset. So your goal is to think, what are they talking about, right? Because they subtitled it this, right? So what is a dependable and valuable asset? And again, dependable and valuable are two positively connotated words. Okay, so now we are introduced to people. So psychologist Benjamin Storm from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and researchers Sean Stone and Aaron Benjamin devised an experiment to study students' tendency to depend on the internet for facts. To begin, students divided 60 participants into multiple groups, including an internet group and a memory group, and placed them in front of their computers. The internet group was required to use the search engine Google to answer 8 challenging trivia questions. In contrast, participants in their memory group were permitted only to use their personal knowledge to answer the questions. In the second round, the researchers administered notably easier questions. This time, they allowed each group the option of using Google as they answered. The results showed that 83% of the internet group continued to consult Google in the second round, while only 63% of the memory group chose to do so. So this is the result of the experiment. So that is something that also deserves an annotation, right? This is the result, what they found. And this whole paragraph just tells me about the experiment. So I might write like something like experiment 1, and here they're going to explain experiment 1. So it says people's growing inclination to rely on the internet in order to retrieve information, particularly facts and figures, is called cognitive offloading. So again, this term should scream out at you, right? They're defining a term for you, and it's something new. It's not like the word table, right? You guys probably haven't heard of cognitive offloading. So whatever the author is defining something for you, that definitely deserves an annotation. That definitely deserves an underline. Now we have a new character, a researcher, Evan F. Risco and Sam Gilbert, who have written extensively about the topic, say a similar process has been taking place for centuries. In the past, people used resources like encyclopedias to assist their memories. However, today the internet, serving a vast extended memory, allows people to digitally access and retrieve much larger volumes of information. Consequently, people's minds are freer for other cognitive feeds, such as connecting data, learning new information, or solving problems. So this at the end seems like an important conclusion, right? And another big thing that I haven't mentioned as of yet that's going to help you guys with reading comprehension is transition words. So consequently is saying as a consequence, right? As a result, like it's developing the point, like saying, here's the big point, here's the big takeaway, right? So it's important to pay attention to transition words, because they highlight whether or not something is important. So when I saw consequently at the end of a paragraph, that sort of a bell goes off in my head that this is important. This is kind of the main conclusion, the main takeaway that the author wants me to take away from this. So basically, they define cognitive offloading. Basically, what that means is instead of having to be forced to keep all this information in our brain, we can now keep this information on the internet. And as a result of that, consequently, what this last sentence is saying, our minds are freer for doing other things, for solving problems, for connecting, for learning even more new information, because we don't have to use the brain space or the energy to store all that data because we have the internet to do it for us. And they made sort of an allegory, or they stated a similar example, which is that in the past, we used encyclopedias. So another point to take away from this is that sort of connection between encyclopedia and the internet. Okay, so now the next one is filing information away. So if we keep reading, it says the use of the internet also appears to be modifying the strategies people use to store information in their minds. So again, very predictable. Here is our topic sentence, right? We're switching gears from the last paragraph, but here is what this paragraph is going to be talking about. It's the topic sentence. So it's going not only so this whole thing, right? This whole thing is basically saying internet is good because of cognitive offloading, right? So people are more able to do all these other things, which is what we end with. And now this paragraph is going to be, not only does it cause us to offload information, but it actually changes the way that we do store our information as well. And we have a new mention of a person, Betsy Sparrow and Jenny Liu and Daniel Wegner conducted several studies to show how people efficiently manage their information intake. To begin, the researchers examined how people evaluate which information deserves their effort to remember. For this experiment, participants read 40 trivia facts, such as an ostrich's eye is bigger than its brain, typed the statements into a computer file. Half the participants been previously told the file would be saved, while half believed it would be erased. Next, the participants wrote down every fact they could recall. Those who believed the information would be erased and no longer available could recall 40% more facts than those who believed that the information could be saved. So again, the results of the experiments are important because those are the takeaways. So that's what I'm going to underline. In another experiment, the researchers tested the ability of study participants to remember where to access information. For this trial, participants read and typed trivia statements, which they saved in folders with generic names, such as facts and items. After spending 10 minutes writing down all the facts they could recall from memory, participants were asked which folder contained a particular fact. For example, which folder has the fact about ostriches? Overall, participants recalled the information's location more often than the content itself, correctly identifying 49% of the folders for the specific facts, while only remembering 23% of the actual trivia. The researchers concluded, again, that transition word, that our memory is adapting to the internet age by prioritizing where to locate the information, even when the specific details are forgotten. According to Sparrow, the internet has become an important form of transactive memory. Again, right? A new term, so that definitely deserves an underline for us. An external source of recollections and associative networks that constitute memory. Okay, so again, notice what I'm paying attention to, the conclusions of the studies, right? Because the author is picking those studies for a specific reason. So it's important for me to understand the conclusions as somebody who's reading them. Okay, as the internet's resources continue to expand our external memory, some question whether the process may cause people to depend too heavily on technology. So now, in this paragraph, it seems like this is the first time that we're getting a hint of something negative. And how do I know that it's something negative? Well, depend too heavily, that's definitely a little bit negative. And then putting external in these sort of quotations is changing the tone a little bit, right? Like external memory, meaning not our real memory in our brain. External as in literally outside of our memory on the computer. And then we have however, which is again another transition word, right? So what is however signifying? However is signifying the opposite, right? So the author is bringing up something negative, but then they're saying however. So that is kind of telling us, sure, there is this acknowledgement of a potential counter argument that the internet might be something negative. However, here's why that's not necessarily true. And then they bring up this guy, Steven Pinker. So however, Steven Pinker, a professor of psychology at Harvard University, says knowledge is increasing exponentially. Human brain power and waking hours are not. Fortunately, again, a transition word that's very positive, the internet and information technologies are helping us manage, search, and retrieve our collective intellectual output at different scales, from Twitter and previews to ebooks and online encyclopedias. Far from making us stupid, these technologies are the only things that will keep us smart. So here is our overall conclusion from this guy, Steven Pinker. Now, before I get to the body paragraph, what is your guys' overall impression on this passage? So as Mrs. Kweller told us, she wrote on top of the passage if it's largely positive or negative. So what do you think this author is trying to communicate about the internet? A mostly positive thing or mostly negative? And tell me why. And just put it in the chat. There's too many of you guys to unmute. Yeah, so I see a lot of you guys in the chat are putting positive. So what tells you guys that? What are the hints and what are the strategies that we sort of relied on for you guys to understand that this is a more positive passage? Good, positive connotations. Good. So what kind of words did we see? I can look back here. You guys point out some words that are more positive. Good, good. Okay, good. You guys are getting it. And it ended positively. So that's another really important point. The way that the passage begins and the way that the passage ends is really important to communicate the overall sort of vibe, the overall takeaway, right? Because you want to begin with telling people and you want to end with like the main point that you're getting across. So it ended positively, saying that the internet keeps us smart. And I also want to say that the opinion of this guy says it's the only thing that will keep us smart. So this is okay when it's somebody's opinion, but I want to also make the point that in the answer choice, you want to avoid this extreme language. And I'll show you guys again when we get to the actual questions, but you want to avoid extreme language unless it's like specifically what did Steven Pinker say, right? But generally we want to avoid extreme language. So you're going to avoid the answer choices with never. You're going to avoid the answer choices with always, with only. So any extreme is a big no-no. Now, I also want to talk to you guys about this figure. We haven't gotten there yet. So not every single passage on this exam will have a figure, but at least one will, usually about two will. And sometimes it could just be a figure like the way we look at this one. Sometimes it could be a table that you guys will have to interpret, or like a bar graph or a line chart or something like that. But this usually, though, it's something that is mentioned in the passage, but the figure itself gives you information that's not in the passage. So it's important that you guys actually look at the figure too, because we extract extra information that's not in the passage. And there will be at least one question in the answer, in the questions stems, that will ask you about the figure. Okay, so new information goes to sensory memory. And then with attention, it goes to your short-term memory. And then we can either choose to store it and then it becomes long-term memory. And then we're able to sort of retrieve it from our long-term memory, and it goes back and forth. But if we don't rehearse information, it's forgotten. So unfortunately for you guys, this passage is extremely relevant to studying for the SHSAT. So if you guys don't rehearse the information that we're going over today, if you don't practice these strategies, they won't move on to your long-term memory and then you'll forget. So it's very, very important to rehearse and repeat. And that's exactly what this thing is telling us, this passage is telling us, or this figure. And information is maintained through repetition, which is why sometimes you hear me repeating myself over and over and over again. Okay, so anyone have any questions about this passage, about how we read it, how we annotated it, any vocabulary words, anything with the figure before we actually get to the questions?
Olga, can you give a suggestion? What do you think the time allocation should be? Because the last thing I want is to have a situation where the student is spending an hour looking at the figure, reading the passage. Like realistically, what do you think they should be allocating? Because as I said, it is the worst thing you can do to spend way too much time looking at the figure, looking at the passage. If you could just give an idea, please, proportionally.
Of course. The reason why we're doing it so in depth right now is, again, because I am sort of teaching you guys, right? So I want you guys to sort of get into my head of how I'm actually reading this. But it's important for you guys to understand that a lot of this, a majority of this, is just happening in my brain, right? I'm not talking out loud when I'm taking an exam, and neither will you guys be. So to Ms. Francis's question, ideally, I would not be spending more than like 3 minutes reading the passage and looking at the figure in total, because overall, you want to be spending between 10 to 12 minutes on the full thing. So by what I mean by that is reading it and answering all of the questions. So usually you don't want to give yourself that much time at all. And a lot of this has to happen automatically, which is why it's so important for you guys to practice. So you don't even have to think about all the adjectives. As you're reading, you automatically know, okay, positive or okay, negative. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I hope that answers the question. And the majority of the time you want to focus on the questions, right? Because that's where your points lie. You want to, the reading is just to create a roadmap for yourself to find the answers. So you don't need to, you're not reading this to write an essay on it, to analyze it, to give kind of your best impression of what the author is talking about. You're reading this systematically using these strategies to pull out the necessary information to answer the questions. Make sense?
Yeah, everyone, now we're going to go and we're going to do a very deep dive into the questions. So don't tune out, don't zone out, take a deep breath. That deep breath is your break. Break over. All right, now we're going to do a very deep dive and understand why the right answers are correct and why the incorrect answers are wrong. And we're going to begin the deep dive. All right, let's go. Pay attention, everyone. High alert, heavy focus. Go.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. So the first question tells us the details in paragraph 3. Okay, so right away we're talking about the details. So remember we talked about details, right, in the nonfiction part. So we're looking for the details in paragraph 3. And then they tell us exactly what about cognitive offloading. So we know what that is. That's something that we annotated, that we underlined, that we defined. And then to convey a central idea of the passage. So now we have to think, okay, there's 3 steps to this, right? We need to find the details in paragraph 3, and we know that they're about cognitive offloading, and we need to connect. So we need to connect the details to the main idea. And remember, I told you guys that this is exactly the process, right? There's a topic sentence, there's a thesis, topic, details, and they're all connected. And because we're aware of that structure, we now understand exactly what the question wants from us. Okay, so now looking at the answer choices, E says, suggesting that reliance on the internet for information is inevitable. Okay, so we just talked about words that are extreme language. So a word like inevitable, I would categorize as extreme, right? Inevitable means there's nothing that we can do. It's inevitable. So very unlikely for this to be the answer. F says demonstrating how the methods used to store and find information have changed over time. So this choice I'm already leaning to because I like the word change, because I remember if we go back into the passage and we remember the topic sentence right here, it says modifying the strategies people use to store information. So it's very important for you to connect the information in the passage, the words in the passage, to the words in the answer choices. So change and modify are synonyms. So sometimes we'll get lucky and they'll use the same exact word. Sometimes you have to take the extra step and they're a synonymous word. But so far I like choice F and I don't like choice E. So I would put a line through it. And then we're going to keep reading, explaining how encyclopedias and the internet are similar sources of information. Okay, so what do you guys think about G? Is this the main idea of the passage, or is that more like a detail? And how do you know? Of course, right? It's a detail. And how do you know? It's way too specific. It's too specific. So the word encyclopedia only comes up in the passage 1 time. So this is way too small, right? Too much of a detail. And you cannot pick a detail when they're asking us about the central idea in the passage. They're asking us, how do the details get to the central idea, not what are the details? So not G. And then finally H, implying that more information can be understood now than ever before. So I think that the difficulty here, I think that all of you guys can get to this, and then you're picking between F and H. So this kind of, a lot of students always ask me, like, I got down to the two, how do I pick the right one? So this is the most kind of crucial step that I would guess that most of you guys are at in your process, right? Because you're kind of late across this journey. You guys have all been studying for this test. So how do we choose between F and H? So the answer is very simple. You want to answer the question that they're asking you, right? So it's not just which of the following is true or which of the following does the passage mention, but they're telling you about where. So this information, more information can be understood now than ever before, is something that's potentially true, but not about cognitive offloading and not about the main idea in this passage. Does that make sense? And not something that the author early in the passage, in these paragraphs in paragraph 3 or in the beginning of paragraph 4, they don't talk about that there, where they're mentioning cognitive offloading. They're not saying that now we're able to learn more information than ever. And those details in paragraph 3 are not relevant to us being able to learn more information than ever. Does that make sense to everybody? Why that's true? Okay, good. So our correct answer here is choice F.
So I want to add a couple of things so that we all go into it. So at this stage, I just want to show you how to pick F without even like looking at the passage. I just want to show you some good techniques. And Olga, if you could just take some notes. Okay, ready? So the question is, everyone's paying attention, right? Say yes. Ready? The details in paragraph 3 about cognitive, whatever, convey a central idea. So what is definitely true? So the only thing that is definitely true is a maybe. So let's even write that down. Can everyone just like repeat that 10 times? The only answer that's definitely true is a maybe answer. Let's say it 10 times. Everyone, let's just do it. Let's do like a seance, like 10 times. The only answer that is definitely true is a maybe. Got it? So the only time something is 100% definitely true is a maybe answer. It's a wishy-washy, maybe, kind of, sort of answer. Maybe, kind of, sort of. Your end goal is going to be to have a maybe, sort of, kind of answer. Got it? So now I'm looking at F, right? Is everyone following along? Say yes. I'm going off. Hello. Is everyone following along? Say yes. Good. Now look at E. So without even reading the passage, I would never pick E. Suggesting that a reliance on the internet for information is inevitable. Like you must rely on the internet. It is totally inevitable. You must do it. Like, just like I would never pick it. I would never pick the word inevitable because the only answer choice that's definitely true is a maybe. In life, the only thing that is certain is uncertain, okay? Suggesting suggesting that a reliance on the internet for inevitable, I would totally say no way. Like I wouldn't even read the passage. I would never pick it because that word inevitable is an extreme word. It's 100% wrong. It's such an extreme word. It's like it must be true. Good. I obviously like F because demonstrating how the methods used to store, they have changed, whatever, they changed 1%, put like a 1% next to it. 1% is good enough to make it the right answer. Inevitable is like 100%, so that makes it a wrong answer. When you can say something is 100%, it's a wrong answer. Straight up wrong, okay? When you can say it could, maybe, can, those are good, okay? So F is good. I put like a heart next to it because I like it changed a little bit. How much did it change? 1%. Next, explaining how encyclopedias and the internet are similar sources of information. It just like tells me nothing. So I'm not even, forget that one. I really like F. H, implying that more information can be understood now. This is the part I don't like. Than ever before. You see that? Circle that, than ever before. So there's never been a point
ever in history, ever, that there was not even 1 hour where you can imply more information can be understood now than ever before. Do you see, like, E? Does everyone understand that? Like, E is definitely wrong. Look at that wording. The wording is definitely wrong. It's inevitable. It's bad. Okay. Implying that more information can be understood now, more now than ever before. It's definitely wrong. And then G just like doesn't even tell me anything. So the way that I would say is I would eliminate right away. I would eliminate E and I would eliminate H right away. Maybe I go back on G, but I'll tell you, just forget the passage. Look at those look at those answers. Inevitable is a terrible choice. It's 100%. It's absolute. Olga, if you could just go over like some other like options that are just always wrong. Like there's certain words that are just extreme words and they're always wrong. And then other words tend to be right. Sometimes can, may, like simple stuff. Good. So Olga, if you could just elaborate on that.
Yeah, and that's a discussion that we started having, and here's our list. We can expand on it. So we already talked about avoiding extreme choices, right? So if the answer choice has never in it, you wouldn't pick it. Always, you wouldn't pick it. Only, but you wouldn't pick it. And all the synonyms that we saw. So ever, we saw inevitable. These are the base words that your mind should think of, and any word that is sort of related to that is too much on one side, you should avoid 100%. And then just to make a list of good words, like Francis was talking about, may, could, sometimes, all of those are good words. Demonstrating is another good word, but all of these are another sort of point that you guys can think of. So when we suggest and when we imply, these are very synonymous, right? And these are like implications versus details usually just demonstrate, right? The point of including details is to support your topic sentence. So usually your details are just support. They're just demonstrating something. You don't really use details to imply something. When you imply or when you suggest, you use a lot of your own interpretation of those details, right? A detail itself is usually neutral. So details themselves don't suggest or imply something. It's our interpretation of that. So even using those words in the beginning can sort of help us get to the right answer. And demonstrating in choice F is very much that safe answer choice when we're talking about details and within the main idea. Okay, good. So let us keep going. So this next one, again, is a very similar question type. So that just shows you that what we're teaching you is important because it keeps coming up. So this is saying, how do the details, so again, we're looking about the details, about the experiment described in paragraph 5, convey a central idea of the passage. So more of the very much same, right? So they want us to look at details. They're telling us where to look. So we're going to go back to paragraph 5, and they want us to connect those details to the main idea. And again, we're looking for an answer that 100% conveys the central idea. And we're looking for good answer choices, right? So just by looking at the choices, we can see what's considered kind of a safer answer choice or a less safe answer choice. Okay, so let's go back to paragraph 5 and think about what the experiment they talk about here, right? And we already underlined, right, where the conclusion of the experiment is. So I'm not going to spend time rereading that whole paragraph. I'm just going to read that conclusion. So those that believe the information would be erased and no longer available could recall 40% more facts than those who thought the information would be saved. And the topic sentence here is highlighted up here, that the use of the internet is changing the way that we store information in our brains. And this experiment is showing us that by saying that when people know that something could be saved, they work less hard to remember it. Okay, so now we know sort of what we're talking about. So let's now read the answer choices and see which matches. So they suggest that the act of repeating information by typing it on a keyboard may improve a person's memory. So what do I like? I love this word may, right? That's a good thing about this answer choice. But what makes this answer choice incorrect is that it's not talking about this experiment. It's tricking you by talking about a different experiment, because in this experiment, they were not repeating information by typing it on a keyboard. This experiment is just by telling people that it's going to be saved versus not saved, and does not change what they remember. So this is a very common trick used on this test, where they give you an answer that could make sense, but it's not answering the question. It's talking about a different experiment, something else mentioned in the passage. So although we like this word may, it's a fake answer. And I always find that sometimes they do this, they give you a good answer that's like almost there, and they make it choice A because it's the first thing that you guys read and you guys just want to circle it and move on. But beware of that, because the test makers know that students tend to do that. So be very, very vigilant when you're picking choice A. Make sure in your head that you're 100% sure that you're answering the question that they are asking you.
And I want to add some things you need to always know. You will never have a situation where every answer is A, every answer is B, you're never going to have like 5 A's in a row or 5 B's in a row. There's an algorithm. So just remember every answer choice. Just remember in terms of what you're choosing. If you notice that you picked 4 A's out of 5, you made a mistake. So just remember that you will never have those situations. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so we're done with choice A. It's not answering our question. It's not even talking about the experiment they're asking us about. Next, let's think about B. They explain that a person will forget information faster if the information is considered unimportant. So already I do not love the language here, right? Because it's not saying the person may forget, it's saying they will. So that's a form of what we call extreme. That's what Francis and I were trying to get across in the first question, right? So that seems a little bit too intense, right?
We're definitely not picking something like this. This is an extreme. We don't even need to read the passage. This is wrong. This is straight up bad word choice.
Exactly. Okay, so we're done with that choice. Next, C, they indicate that a person may start to forget details. Okay, so again, word that I like, right? They're using may, when the amount of information becomes overwhelming. But again, they're tricking you because this is not what the experiment concluded, right? So it's the amount of information was the same in both cases. So that's what makes this incorrect, because this is just not what the experiment was talking about. And then finally, D, they suggest that memory is affected by whether a person expects to have information in the future. So this is 100%, right? Because this is what the experiment was about, whether it was saved or not saved. So this, whether it's saved or not saved, is another way to say whether they'll have access to it in the future. So this idea of access matches the word choice of it being saved or not saved. And that's exactly what the experiment was talking about. So that's why our best answer here is choice D. Okay, does anybody have questions about this one?
So let's do a deep dive one more time. Okay, hold on. Okay, now that I'm here, I want to do a deep dive again. Okay, just need it. All right, let's go over this again. Why is D the right answer? Can we go over it, please? Go ahead. I just want to be clear. You will not see 5 A's in a row, 5 B's in a row. It is extremely, extremely unlikely that will happen. You'll never see 10 C's in a row. Like these types of combinations are extraordinarily unlikely. So look at the combination of choices. With that being said, does everyone, Olga, if you could just super elaborate, let's look at D. Suggest is great. Let's put a heart next to it. Suggest is a great starter. Memory is affected. 1% is perfectly fine. So how much can memory be affected? 1%. And you know what? 1% is good enough to get me the answer, right? Because the perfect answer choice is the one that leaves room. It's wishy. We can even write it down. The wishy-washy answer choice is the golden answer. Okay? They suggest that memory is affected by whether a person expects to have access to information in the future. How much access? 1%.
Okay,
Let's
and
look at that. Go ahead.
the other important thing about choice D is look at just this word memory, right? So they're asking us about a central idea. So something about the main idea must always be in the answer that you're picking when the question is asking you about the central idea, right? So memory is what this is really about. The title is a memory revolution. So that's another sort of suggester for me when I see that main word being in my answer choice when they're asking me about the central idea of the passage. That's another sort of check in my like pros box for that answer choice that I'm on the right sort of path, that is likely a good answer. Does that make sense to everybody?
B is definitely wrong. Look at this wording. Look at B. If Olga, you can underline it. They explain that a person will forget. Will forget. Since when does the SHSAT predict the future? This is never, it's very rare you're going to get a will, okay? A person will 100%, definitely, absolutely, conclusively, certainly, any of these words where everything is 100% going to happen. Look at this. This is definitely wrong. They explain that a person will forget and it will definitely avoid words where it's 100%, exclusively, solely, only, universally. These words where everything it's 100. Write this down, please. 100% yes or 100% no. Those are bad. Don't avoid those. Stay away from extreme yes or extreme no. Okay. And who's to judge what's unimportant? No. Okay. So just remember that. So if you could just put a circle and a slash through it. So 100% yes, 100% no, circle, slash. So no, these are not the right answer choices. No, do not pick it. When it says may, when it says can, something like it could happen. There's a 1% chance of rain. And you know what? That's enough for it to be the right answer. Please remember this. These are super high level strategies. I used these strategies when I sat for the LSAT. Olga's using them for the MCAT. These are really high level strategies of just what to avoid. Avoid extremes. Let's write it down one more time. Avoid extreme answer choices, no matter what you do. And I'm not just talking about SHSAT. I'm talking about PSAT, SAT, ACT. Avoid extremes. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, let's look at the next question. So we're changing the question type, right? The first two questions we did were very similar. They're looking about how details connect to the main idea. So now we're introduced to a new type of question. So this question is giving us a specific sentence from paragraph 7, and it's asking how the sentence contributes to the structure and development of ideas in the passage. So now we're switching gears, right? We're not thinking about central idea. We're now thinking about structure and development, right? So right away, your brain should be thinking about the beginning of our webinar when we thought and we talked and we broke down the structure of these kinds of nonfiction passages, right? So this is what you're thinking about, the thesis, right? The topic sentence, the subtitles, the way that this passage is sort of chopped up for us to make it make sense, right? Why did the author choose to chop it up like this and structure it that way? Okay, so now we're reading this sentence that they want us to look at. So as the internet's resources continue to expand our external memory, again, remember that part, we talked about that part already, right? Where they talk about external in quotations, right? That's already changing the tone. Some question, so again, question, somewhat negative, whether the process may cause people to depend too heavily on the technology, again, negative. So if you guys remember, this is when we brought up the first instance of a counter argument, right? So this is contributing to the structure and development of ideas in the passage, because it's bringing up an opposing point. Up until here, everything in the passage was very positive about the internet. This is the first inkling that this might be something bad for the memory. So let's find the answer choice that talks about it. But we know 100% that we're looking for the word counter argument in the answer. So again, right away, we have two choices that have the word counter argument. So I don't even really care about E and F. And I mean, we'll go back through them and I'll tell you guys why those are wrong, but I'm automatically drawn to G and H because I know that this is a counter argument. I already established that myself before even reading the answer choices. So a lot of times when you're taking this kind of test, the goal is you want to already have a semblance of an answer in your head, and you want to find the choice that matches what you thought already in your head, right? You don't want the choices to manipulate you and change how you are already thinking about it. You want to know that this has something to do with the counter argument, and now you're focused on the answer choices that are just asking you about a counter argument, and you're not being distracted by E or F or anything else that they're bringing up. So let's look at G. It signals a shift. So 100%, right? This is a change from a neutral point of view to a presentation of an argument and a counter argument. So I like choice G, right? Because I did say that there's a shift, because before that they're talking about all the sort of good things of the internet or neutral things of the internet. And then we have a negative. And then remember, we have an argument and then a counter argument, because what happens is they bring up the argument, and then remember right after that, if we go back, there's a however. So it's like an argument and another argument. So we have a counter argument and an argument. So I'm already attracted to that choice because it's everything that we sort of talked about before I even read this question. So I'm already attracted to G. Let's look at what H says. It introduces and marks a transition from an optimistic tone to a cautious tone as the counter argument is developed. So this is the part that makes H 100% wrong, because as you guys all told me, the passage ends positively, right? Far from making us stupid, these technologies are the only things that will keep us smart. So it does not develop this counter argument, and we do not end with a cautious tone. We end with a more positive tone. So H is 100% wrong because of this part. A cautious tone is not true. So our best answer here is G. And now let's just quickly look at E and F. Presents a claim about the risks of relying on the internet that prompted the research. Again, not true, right? That's not what prompted the research. And it contrasts a disadvantage with the benefits. It doesn't contrast, it just mentions it, right? It's not comparing. We don't see any transition words that compare. And in that case, this is also wrong. So again, this one was pretty clear, right? You guys, shift is another word that's very soft, right?
It's
signals a shift,
wishy-washy. And
right?
you
It's not
see, you can
signaling
put
a
1%.
revolution.
Go ahead.
Exactly.
So
Exactly what Francis is saying. A shift, a 1% shift, a small shift, right? It's not saying that it's a huge transition, revolutionizing. It's words that are very soft. That's what you guys, those are the vibes that you want to go for. Does that make sense? Okay, anybody have questions on number 12?
I just want to remind all of you, it's very easy if you think about like end goals and multiple choice. G has such great wording. It signals a shift. If you could just write like 1%, it signals a 1% shift. And then the question, how does the sentence contribute? I would say, how does the sentence 100% contribute to something? By 1% doing something. So you see how that's 100. If you could put an arrow to the 1%. So 100 to the 1%, you see like these answers are great. Okay. These are great answers. And again, I want to write, I know I made you write it so many times, avoid extreme answer choices, because more often than not, they're wrong and the extremes are wrong, and you can eliminate the extremes, not only for SHSAT, PSAT, SAT, ACT, MCAT, LSAT, GRE, GED, everything. Like, just avoid the extreme answer choices. All
And
you need is for the shift to be like a little teeny tiny shift, and then your answer is right. The correct answer, the answer that is always right, is the one that's just super simple. And it's the wording you'll notice is simple. It just keep it simple, silly. Okay, just keep it simple. Keep your answer choice. It signals a shift, a little bit of a shift, right? That's it. Okay, let's keep going.
okay. 13. So now this is asking us the study described in paragraph 6 influenced the researchers' ideas about memory in the digital age by. So basically, this is a direct detail question, right? So the answer to this, you don't have to think, you just have to find it. And they're making it nice and easy for us because they're telling us where the answer is located. They're telling us, go back to paragraph 6. That is where your answer is. So we're going to do exactly that. We're going to go back to paragraph 6, and we have already highlighted what the main idea of that passage of that experiment is, right? What the conclusion of that experiment was. We already underlined it. So it says that the participants would remember the location more than the actual information. And they concluded that our memory is adapting to the internet age by prioritizing where to locate the information, even when we lose the specific details, right? So just to answer, to remind myself, this study was about remembering location more than the actual details. That's what the study is. So now we just find an answer choice that matches that. So A, highlighting instances when organizing detailed information made it easier to remember. This is, first of all, this is not correct, right? Because it's not that it's easier to remember or harder to remember, it's just whether or not they remembered the folder or not. So this part is what makes this wrong. It's not about easier or harder at all. This is not it. And then the language of this, highlighting instances, I don't like that word because in an experiment, it doesn't highlight like instances. It's overall what the experiment concludes, right? It's not like they had multiple trials or multiple instances of anything. So this word just doesn't match the language of this, the tone of the scientific experimental type passage. That's another important fact for you guys to take away from. The language has to match what's in the passage, and instances here does not match. Next, confirming. Already we don't like this choice, right? Confirming is very extreme for something to be confirmed. I don't like that choice. And this experiment had nothing to do, like they were given keywords, but the keywords was what had to be remembered. So this is not true either. And then C, identifying a shift. Okay, so where have we seen this before, right? Last time we liked the shift because we called that a wishy-washy word. So already I like this, from remembering specific information to remembering where to find it. And again, the key, what I wrote down here is location, and I'm matching what I wrote down location to the language in the answer choices. So again, I'm going to write this really big for you guys. Match language in passage to answer choice. The answers are there and the passage is there, and you just have to make the connection. So location, and then the choice says where to find it. So the where matches very much with location, and we have this comfortable wishy-washy word shift. So that's good enough for me to know that C is most likely the correct answer. And then just to look at D, emphasizing that remembering a basic idea is more important than storing detailed information. We don't like things like that. More important, most important. Who's to say what's more or less important? So D is no good. C is the choice that we're looking for. It's that nice, comfortable choice. Shift. pay attention to things that keep repeating. So if you found multiple questions that are asking us about details and central idea, if we now had 2 questions in one passage where the word shift was used in the correct answer. So the SHSAT has patterns, and that's what we're trying to teach you guys. So remember these sort of test taking patterns, and you'll get to the right answer even if you don't 100% understand the passage. Is that clear for everybody? Number 13.
And then to add to this, as we're looking at the question, again, do you notice something with 13? And then what do you notice with question 12? So let's go back to question 12 and 13. What do you notice in terms of pattern, which is interesting? Who can type? What do you notice is happening in both question 12 and 13 in terms of word choices? Look at 12 and now look at 13. Yeah. No, Zaini, you got it. You're the first one to reply. So you'll notice it's both wishy-washy, but in particular, notice the wording. Do you see that? Like this is like super high tech. Examine the answer choices, right? So look at the question 13. The study described in paragraph 6 influenced the researchers' ideas about memory in the digital age. Ready? The study described, did it influence it a little bit or a lot? 100%. So next to the word influenced, 100%, right? So what's the right answer? It has to be a little bit correct to be fully right, okay? And it definitely, oh, another thing you don't want to do, don't choose an answer like where you're going to get sued or where you're insulting someone. Like you're never insulting people in this exam either. And you're never suing, okay? So for example, emphasizing that remembering the basic idea is more important than storing details. This is like hurtful. This is like an insulting answer. We don't choose that either. But do you notice? So once again, can you put like a heart next to the answers for 13 and for 12, Olga, please? Perfect. Okay, everyone, you see how these like memorize the correct answer, the word choices, the way the answers sound, soft, wishy-washy, gentle wording. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. So next question is asking us which evidence from the passage is most relevant. So they're asking us for evidence most relevant to the claim in paragraph 7 that far from making us stupid, these technologies are the only things that keep us smart. So this is how the passage ended, if you guys remember. So this is the main conclusion. This is the quote from that guy, Steven Pinker. This is the counter argument, if you guys remember, right? So they bring up the counter argument that maybe this is not good because we're relying too much on the internet, and they're saying the opposite. So now we have to find some evidence that supports this takeaway. So now let's find that evidence. So let's look at choice E. It says the revelation that most people opted to use the internet to answer relatively easy trivia questions rather than relying on their own brain power. So just think about this, like logically, even if you've never read this passage, is this a good thing, right? Is this something that's telling us that the internet will keep us smart? The fact that people are using easy questions, the fact that they're Googling easy questions instead of using their brain. If I told you guys, would you think, oh, that's a really good thing about the internet or a bad thing? Without even reading this, what do you guys think? So this is obviously a negative, right? It's obviously a bad thing. And like you guys told me before we even got to the questions, we put a big plus at the beginning of the passage, right? So what this is asking us is to find a detail that supports that positive. So how could it ever be choice E when choice E is negative? Choice E is obviously a bad thing. So we would never pick that. And also, I don't like this language of revelation. Revelation sounds very dramatic, very too much, right? Like revealing something incredible. Revelation is a very kind of dramatized word that is unlikely to be the answer in the test. We look for words like description, that's a good word. Assertion, that's a good word. More like neutral, factual things. Revelation carries too much oomph behind it, right? We want to pick something bland, dry. Okay, F, the assertion, that's better, that the storage of information frees people to focus on higher order tasks like problem solving. So this is obviously a positive, right? Because we have the internet to store our information, our brains can do other things. We can solve problems, we can connect dots. So this is good. G, the connection between how people organize information in their mind and their ability to recall that information. I can't tell if this is positive from negative, right? This seems like pretty, like this is telling me nothing, right? I'm getting nothing out of this. So I don't really know if this is supporting the answer or not. And then finally, H, the description of transactive memory as an expansive internal that people can use to store information. Again, this is not charged. This is neutral, nothing. And nothing answers don't necessarily mean they're wrong, but in this context, we're trying to find something that supports this positive claim. So we need something positive. So we're not going to pick the neutral choices. So the best answer here is choice F, because it's positive, and that's what we're trying to support. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good.
So
right.
should we go back, or let's do one more really fast? We'll go through it. When the question says which evidence from the passage is most relevant, get rid of the word most, forget the word most. So let's write this. When you see the word most, can we write it under, because we have the space under it? So when you see the word most, just rewrite it, especially when it's in the question choice, write 100%. So which evidence from the passage is 100% relevant, which is important to the claim made here. So what is 100%? When you see the word most, that's the one you're choosing, okay? Assertion is saying, I agree with everything that Olga said earlier, so I don't want to really repeat it too much, but I will say asserting, you're just kind of asserting it. Revelation is like, oh my God, revelation is like, I don't know, big. That's like big, but assertion is okay. You've asserted something, all right. The storage of information on the internet frees people. How much? 1%. It frees them a little bit, and that's enough for it to be the correct answer. So frees people 1% is enough for it to be the correct answer.
Okay, good.
So if you want to, Olga, go into anything else here, I just want to, if you could just do one more piece of a deep dive, why G and H are wrong, please.
Sure. So again, in this case, we're looking for a choice that is positive. And we overwhelmingly describe this passage as positive. Before we even got to the answer choices, we put that big plus at the front of this passage. So this question is addressing that. It's addressing our ability to find that positive choice. So G, we can eliminate, the first one, E, sorry, we can eliminate right away because revelation is dramatic and it's negative. So that one's no good. But G and H are a little bit more nuanced because they're not negative, but they are just telling me nothing. They're bland. They're not supporting that it's not relevant to this claim. It's not telling me why technology is a good thing, why technology will keep us smart. It's just a very bland, very irrelevant to the question they're asking us, irrelevant to that end sentence choices, both of them. And that's why we can eliminate both of them. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to sort of trek forward to make sure that we finish these last three in the next 30 minutes or so. And that way we've gotten through one big passage and we did it very systematically. And we kind of did a deep dive on each type of these questions. And these types of questions will repeat. So that's why we're really taking the time to break them down for you guys. Okay, so this is asking me which sentence from the passage suggests that using internet search engines may lead people to rely less on their own ability to recall information. So just just trust us that we're not making this up. Look at the language in their question. They're using may in their question, right? They're not saying will lead people, because their question is exactly in the same style that the right answer should be written in. Does that make sense? Soft language. So follow their lead. Use the language that they're exposing you to, whether it's in the passage, whether it's in the questions, and match that language in your answer choices to make sure that you're getting to the right answers. Okay, so using internet search engines may lead people to rely less on their own ability to recall information. So we're trying to find the evidence for this claim. So let's look through the choices that they're giving us. So A is saying, in the past few decades, the internet has begun an integral component of daily life for many people. So it being an integral component of daily life, can I connect that to this? That people are relying less on themselves to recall information. So integral component is way too general, right? This is very general. Integral component in what sense? The question is asking me about recall information. Remember that this passage is about memory, but choice A has nothing to do with memory. It's very general, it's very broad, it's not mentioning memory at all. So that's why I would eliminate choice A. B, the internet group was required to use the search engine Google to answer 8 questions, challenging trivia questions. Again, was required, extreme, and also doesn't make sense because this is not a takeaway from the passage. This is just something very specific about how the experiment was conducted. Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. My screen was just lost, right? Can anybody still see my screen?
Nope. Although
Okay.
you're very blue, Olga. All right. So I just want to remind you, as Olga's resetting her iPad, which we will figure out later tonight after 9 o'clock what is going on. Just remember, extreme answers we stay away from. So no matter what happens, you're staying away from. Okay. And Olga's resetting her iPad again and again. We're probably just going to empty out space. As you're choosing your answers, make sure that you choose something that may be true, can be true. Olga, you're good? You're resetting it?
Yeah, I'm just gonna share on my computer because I don't want to take away time.
No, it's fine. Just reset. We'll wait for the iPad. I also just want to remind you guys, we have the webinar today, tomorrow, after tomorrow, then next week, Monday, Tuesday, we have 2 big webinars also. And Olga will be emailing the PDF. And this evening, Olga will be hanging out with her iPad because she's going to be deleting her so that she can open up more memory. It seems that we have taken way too many notes at Kweller Prep. We've gifted Olga this iPad at the start of the pandemic, so the iPad has had quite a long life. Who's going to work at Kweller Prep as we're waiting for this iPad to restart? So who is going to work at Kweller Prep when they grow up? Who is going to be my future Olga presenter? All right, so as we're waiting, I just want to remind you first, we have the webinar on the stress reduction, which you'll go through that entire email. We have the webinar on the lottery. We're going to go through all of that. We're going to go through plans. If you're taking a test on a Wednesday, Olga, you're restarting, yes?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
You are my future leaders. Someone said she won't have time to tutor. She will be the future president. I will totally take it. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. If someone in this room is future president, I will be so happy. Like, I will tell everyone. I'm going to put it in the Kweller Prep newsletter. So with that being said, please remember your exam is probably on a Wednesday. My best advice to you is to, oh my gosh, you guys want my best advice? If possible, go to school for like an hour on Tuesday, clock in your attendance because attendance matters, and then just go home because at that point, you just want to spend you just want to kind of relax and rest on Tuesday. So if you could, that Monday and Tuesday, go into school and give yourself like a half a day. If the parents could even arrange, I would highly recommend that you take it very, very easy Monday, Tuesday. Obviously rest on the weekend, but the test is probably on Wednesday. If you're oh, you do have Tuesday off. Oh, that's amazing. So then I would say try to take Monday off. Give yourself like a good 2 days just to rest. Really, really rest your body. I highly recommend you take those 2 days, unplug, don't go on Instagram, don't go on TikTok, like don't do anything. Just spend a few days just really relaxing your mind, positive energy, positive vibes. So just remember the days leading to the exam, just really good energy, positive energy the whole way. If you're taking a test at a charter school, it's going to be on a weekend at a DOE test site. Make sure that you get there early and don't eat at home. Eat when you're there, because if you eat at home, then you're going to be hungry once you get there. Just make sure that you're not eating a lot and then waiting 3 hours to take the test. Once you get to the test site, you can get food around that area. So we're going to go into that during the stress reduction webinar, but I just want to make sure to point that out right now, that your big opportunities right now will be in the days ahead. Really go through that stress reduction email. I spend so much time on it. Okay. And Olga, are we good? Are you restarting?
The iPad won't restart, but I'm just going to share my screen. This should work.
Okay.
Does everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay.
We just
and
can't take notes, which is so sad.
once the iPad turns on, I'm going to switch, but I just
Okay,
don't.
fine.
Okay. So guys, this is where we were up to. So again, which sentence from the passage is you suggest that using internet search engines may lead people to rely less on their own ability to recall information. So again, what I was trying to tell you guys before is you want to take the lead of the test writers, right? So what they're telling you, look at the language that they're using, right? Look, they're saying may. So that's exactly the type of language that you want to search for in the answer choices. So you want to follow their lead, right? Use the language that they use in their questions, that they use within their passage, within your answer choices. And again, when we went back to this passage, remember that to rely less suggests that using the internet may rely less on their own ability to recall information. So basically, this is the definition of cognitive offloading. Do you guys remember that? So this is exactly what cognitive offloading is. The fact that we can rely less on our own brain, we can offload it to the computer, and we can use our own brain for other things. So that's the study that we want to find. That's sort of where I want to go back to for my evidence, right? So I know that that was very early in the passage. So I'm steering away from choice D because that's in paragraph 5. And I remember when we go back into the passage that cognitive offloading is something that they told me about very early on. They told me about that in paragraph 2 and 3. And 3 right here, cognitive offloading, right? So I'm looking for my answer somewhere here. Now, one thing that I didn't mention before, that's another important point that I'm going to add to our notes as soon as the iPad reboots, is that the questions are oftentimes chronological. So if we look at this paragraph, this passage, right? They ask us about paragraph 3, then they ask us about paragraph 5, then they ask us about paragraph 7. So it's very, very chronological. So the question that they're asking you, it's important for you guys to understand where to look for that information, right? So because I noticed that this is just another way to say cognitive offloading, I know that my answer choice is going to be in either paragraph 2 or 3. So right away, I'm interested in choices B and C. I'm very, very unlikely to pick choice D. And now if you look at choice B, the internet group was required to use the search engine. Again, even though all of these are directly from the passage, we do not want to pick a choice that's something like was required. That's way too extreme. That doesn't leave any space for a comfortable wishy-washy answer choice. So I'm going to steer away from was required. Does that make sense to everybody? And that leaves me with the best answer, which is choice C, which is the specific detail about how 83% of the internet group chose to consult Google, while only 63% of the memory group choose to do so. And this is exactly like, look, using search engines, and then they mention consult Google. So again, we're matching, right? Draw a big arrow on your page between using internet search engine and consult Google. we're matching the language in their question to the answer choice in different words, because they say search engine and then their answer choice says Google, but in reality, they're saying the same thing. They're just replacing it. Does that make sense to everybody? How we got to choice C.
Since we only have a few minutes left, can we just skim through the rest of the passages? I just want to show you guys that all the questions kind of look alike. So let's do that for our remaining, so we're not really going to get into the poems, but let's look at the questions. So can you make the size of the, yeah. All right. So do you see the questions? Like they all sound alike.
Again,
How does the structure of the poem affect the meaning? Get it? Which line supports the idea that a change in the weather will lessen the speaker's appreciation for the city? So do you notice like all of this wording sounds the same? How do the lines develop a central theme, which is another way of saying, can you figure out the main idea? See? So notice the questions. The word choice in the lines helps convey the speaker's belief. So what is the speaker? What's the main idea? What's the tone? Next, the details in lines 9 to 12 convey. What are you getting from these lines in the greater context? Which idea does the comparison of the brownstone house? And then there's a special detail. What is it conveying? What's the idea here? Good, let's keep going. The line, what's the central idea? Central idea, main idea. What's the main idea of the passage? What do you see the most? What are they talking about over and over and over again? The poet develops the speaker's point. So how is the main idea developed? See that? Like we're going over and over again. Do you notice that the questions are always, like it's never going to be an out of the box question, right? And everything's always interconnected. Got it? I feel like we covered a lot of base here. So, and I just want to tell all of you tomorrow. So tomorrow's what? Reading, math, or grammar? What are we? Today we did
Tomorrow's math,
reading.
today is reading.
So tomorrow's math, we're going to do a bunch of math questions. So, and we'll go through them and just really take a moment and reflect on what we covered today. What did you learn today? How is this helping you? Let's also give Olga a super A+ because we are so lucky that we, have you and we have your help. And it just really means a lot that you're doing this while you are a 4th year medical student. So Olga, can you open the chat for everyone, please? Thank you. Let's say with the chat, if you could get everyone, let's type a nice thank you. Thank you so much. So I do want to take a moment to say thank you to you because you're really doing a lot. And these 2-hour webinars are a lot of pressure while you're also in school full time. So I really want to say thank you. Thank you for covering so much. And the tiny technical glitches, we're going to resolve everything. Actually, I'll stay late tonight. We'll resolve it. I also want to remind all of you that tomorrow we have the other webinar for math and we'll go over grammar and that's it. And you know what? This test is going to come and go, but Kweller is forever. You're going to learn these skills. You're going to use these skills. You're going to practice this over and over again. So let's finish up a little bit early today. Is that okay? And we'll just cover the technical things together as well. But everyone just take a moment. Let's say thank you. All right. And let's take a moment. I'm going to unmute everyone. Let's say thank you to Olga because she has had a very long night with Kweller Prep. All right. So let's take a moment. I'm going to count to 3. So I'm going to ask to unmute you and we're going to count to 3 and we're going to say thank you. Okay. All right, everyone. Olga, thank you so much. 1, 2, 3. Thank you,
Thank
Olga.
you, Olga.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank you, Olga. We're sorry that
Daniel,
you're
what a bahala.
We love you, Olga. Thank you. Thank you so much.
you,
Thank you for the
Olga.
patience you demonstrate. Okay. Thank you. Good luck in medical school, Olga. Don't operate on me. Okay.
Just
Don't
before
operate.
everybody
Don't do
goes,
it.
I just want to put up the answers to the last 2. Because the
Yeah.
screen is working again and I just want to do the due diligence so everybody has this in their notes. But again, as Francis said, I really cannot tell you guys enough that you need to do these practice tests like at least 3 times each, especially the last 2 that are released from this year. this test that we're working on, we're going to be working on the same one tomorrow and on Wednesday as well. But the second one, Form B, is untouched by us. And that's on purpose because I want you guys to take it like a real test and then analyze it and use the time. You see that it takes us 2 hours to really break down just one passage. And that's the way that you guys should be going over your test after you practice. It's like going over the test is, I would say, 100 times more important than taking the test, because you have to pull out these patterns, take what you learned from it in order to be able to apply it to the real test. That's the point of all of this. Does that make sense? And I really just want you guys to succeed and to do well. You really just have 3-4 weeks left. This test will be behind you, and then you guys can all relax like you deserve to. It's really, really important that you guys take away these strategies and just learn how to take the test. It's really, I can't tell you guys enough about how much of a difference it's going to make in your professional life. Just
Everyone check the chat box. That link is really important. If you could please repeat these exams over and over again. As many of you know, I'm also a lawyer, I'm an attorney, and I'm not kidding you, I took every single LSAT 5 times each, and there were like 75 practice exams. So I just want to let you know, I took every single test over and over and over again. So that's the secret to success. Just keep repeating these exams. All right.
And funnily enough, that's what this whole passage is about. It's about memory. It's about repetition. Right here, it's a message for you guys. Information is maintained through repetition. You can't even make this up. This was not even planned. This is the passage that happened to be the first one on the test. And that's exactly what both Francis and I are telling you from our experience. And that's what this passage is subliminally telling you guys also.
Good luck, everyone. Good luck to the 8th graders listening, to the 7th graders. You're so lucky right now. All right. So enjoy. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. We will see you tomorrow for math. Okay. Enjoy. Bye, everyone. Bye, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Bye,
so
guys.
much.
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.